Hats, like any article or clothing, are going to have many, 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 many examples. If we did if I did the approach that I almost try to do with this, like documenting all these different kinds, it could go on forever. I mean, if we did the same thing with any other article of clothing, you could do codes. You would have the 3 Richmond Depot type jackets. You would have so many different kinds of jackets. You would have the Columbus Depot. You'd have commutation jackets. So you'd have lots of variables. So I've tried to tone this back down, because I would just constantly add stuff, and then I would take stuff back and then add stuff. But hopefully I've gotten a good idea for this. So this is a real quote from a soldier. A man who has never been a soldier does not know the amount of comfort there is in a good soft hat. It seems like that carried over, as all 3 prisoners in the famous photo of the soldiers at Gettysburg, all 3 of them are wearing hats. So this sentiment of the necessity and the practicality of a hat over a cap kind of carried over. So there was some, generally, from looking at the time, slouch hats generally had either the brim edging. When you get a hat, it can come in many different ways. You can have it where it's just the felt, or it can get cloth covered over it, and both are very popular. You can have all sorts of brim designs. They can dip up, down. Generally, they were curved. If you see stuff, it generally added strength to the brim, if I am correct. You had all sorts of crown styles. They could be tall, they could be short, they could be more round, they could be more straight-sided. Think of it like a Hardy hat. It's very straight-sided. It's more like a oval, I guess, like a long circle standing straight, like a tube of some sort, I guess you could say. A lot of the hats that were being used by your average Confederate soldier was going to be his just average hat that was for civilians, though there were some military issue. They had generally common colors were black, brown, gray, tan, and a lot of times, due to manual of arms and having to put up your musket right next to your face, they would sometimes pin up the brims of their hats. I haven't done that, but sometimes they would. Sometimes they did that with just a little button pin, maybe an extravagant pin, or maybe they would cut a slit in their brim and put a button through it attached to the crown. They'd make it all unique. If you were enlisted and you added a hat cord, it would have tasseled ends, when if you were an officer, it would have acorns. Though most hats were unadorned, I guess it was just because they were civilian hats. They didn't take the time to go through the whole military decorating process. And one of the Hardy hat, which was the official U.S. Army dress hat, came with all these fancy buttons and brass. But that was also one of the reasons it was disliked, because one soldier remarked that it had enough brass to make a coffee pot or something like that. It seemed kind of extravagant to them. So I just had some pictures here for reference, but I found it unique comparing, let's say, a modern hat that you could, maybe go into Walmart or something or buy, to something like a period reproduction hat like I have. There's some qualities that carry over in modern hats, but not always necessarily true. If you look at, I believe this is Robert E. Lee's son over here to the left. If I'm, am I correct there, Colonel? This is a picture of him and
or his nephew. Either son or his nephew. I'm not sure which one.
Well, if you look at it, he's holding his hat to his side, but he's crushed it underneath him. Okay. It's all crushed up, which I thought was unique, which you can do with a lot of these modern hackable hats, which are the very low end hats. You can just push them up and they come back out, which you can't do with all hats. If I try to do it with, let's say, another hat, I can't always work as well, just because it's not designed for that.
Well, I think, Logan, it's the material of construction is what's a lot of Farbyism is coming in. Like, I won't say any names of some people in our unit, but it seems like they've got some cowboy hats that are made of a wool that is something else. That's not really a wool. Am I totally wrong on this?
No, you're kind of getting the right direction. When Billy was at a Lusty, he has one of those hats. He also makes those, as he markets them as his modern hat. So there's no trying to sneak that into the reenacting market. He markets that as his modern hats, and it's kind of similar to this one here, which is a modern hat. It's basically the way they make them is it's wool and they apply so much pressure so that way it maintains its memory. So I can smush this up, pop it back out, smush it up, pop it back out. They're packable travel hats. And so that's like a factory made thing, when a lot of hats back then, due to the time period, would have been handmade. So you wouldn't have been having a whole big machine constantly applying pressure. And because of handmade hats, a lot of times back then hats came where it's all pushed out like a bubble. And then you get it, and then you could do whatever you wanted with it. You could grab it like that or anything. You could do all sorts of things with it. They were very personal items. And so with these factory made hats that you could get that are very modern, they have this predetermined shape and you can't really change it because it's been put in a machine, applied so much pressure that it will never forget that it looks like this. I couldn't ever make it look a little different on the top or anything like that, just because it's been applied so much pressure. And another thing with a lot of modern hats is because they're made to be closed up and pushed back out, is that they sew plastic into the brim, which wasn't really a thing done back then. So that's really where construction comes in. Although they could be incredibly soft hats back then, there's other features on modern hats that just don't always meet the main criteria, I should say. If that makes sense. So again, I've compiled some more photos, and you can see all these hats kind of vary because again, they're very personal. The guy in the top left's hat's completely different from the guy in the bottom right. They were made, like I said before, hats came in a bubble and you made them yourself in a way you shaped it and did how you wanted. So you'd have the basics. The basic shape is called the open crown, and you see here you have Mosby on the left with a hat and he's holding on his leg, and that's the open crown shape. And there's a lot of these Mississippians here who have their hats like that. That was the basic, that's the way your hat came when you bought it from the store or however like that. So then you could customize it. You could push in the tops and make it really round. This kind of made the crown shorter, maybe made it fit better. That's called telescoping, I guess, because it rounds it out like a telescope. You could also have a pitched crown, which is on the guy at Gettysburg that you see who's sitting on the log. But basically, he just grabbed his hat, just did it like that, and that's how he wore it. And then you would have the way I do my hat, because it's the way I like it, where they have a pinch to the front, just generally kind of got caused because when people would take off their hats, they grabbed it here, and that formed dents, and it also had maybe a crease in the crown like they had telescoped it before. And on the left here, you have Jeb Stuart's hat, which is up in a museum in Virginia, and you also have Robert E. Lee's hat on the right, which are both shaped similarly. So I thought that was unique that they still have their hats and that they still exist in a museum where you can go see it.
Pretty cool.
So I just thought I would mention there's lots of photos that I thought were really good, not just for examining the hats people were wearing, but their uniforms. There's these prisoners at Camp Douglas where the photographer or whoever had gotten very close to take their photos, so you can make out a lot of details. Well, not in this particular photo because when I added it to the slides, it kind of got blurry, but you can make out a lot of unique things. A lot of them are wearing hats. There looks like to be a guy wearing a kepi here in the right to the front row. They're wearing all sorts of different kinds of jackets. You kind of see all these unique things about uniforms when you get these photos that are very up close. There's photos of soldiers in Chattanooga, and you can see Confederate soldiers, and it looks like they're Union guards surrounding them. You can see all the differences there, which I thought was unique because you can get up close and see them again. There's prisoners at Rock Island. You can kind of see that again, the popularity of the slouch hat over, say, a kepi or a forage cap, which it still was used, but they were also, it wasn't completely, I wouldn't say neither or, was depending on the time period, which was more dominant. Very early on in the war, when they were issuing all these new fancy military uniforms, a lot of people had the kepi, but as the war came on, the practicality of a hat would also become popular. So both were very popular. So if you're going to join reenacting, you don't know which kind of headgear to buy. Neither is necessarily wrong because they were both popular.
But
Here we have it.
we sure don't see many Keppies, do we? In all these photos you're
No.
showing. I mean, I think I saw one so far. There's two,
Here's another one. Looks like the guy in the middle in the
yeah.
back. There's a guy with a civilian cap right there in the front, but you also see lots of, again, slouch hats on these prisoners at Belle Plaine Landing. So it's kind of crazy just how, if you look at early war photos, they're all wearing kepis, but it slowly progresses more and more like their hats for some reason, probably because of the rain, all these other unique, the wind, cold, whatever, snow coming down. It just somehow became popular. There's these photo. I don't really think I can zoom in much, but there's a photo of prisoners at White House Landing, and you can kind of see they got so many guys all looking at the camera. You can kind of judge unique features. You can see some. There's some guy way out. If I could zoom in, I would, but there's a guy way out in the right here. This is a good photo to examine if you ever have spare time. He's wearing a hat cord. There's a guy somewhere else in this photo who has the bugle on the front of his hat.
Huh.
Even though not many of these guys seem to be having hat brass, there occasionally pops up, but again, mostly a plain hat was the most popular and preferred. Most popular or just most available. They didn't always get brass, or it just wasn't very well liked. But there is cases of them having adornment. The most common adornment, I think, like I said before, is if they use some sort of badge to pin up the brim, because it was the easiest thing. There's Confederates again in the punch bowl. Again, you can see lots of slouch hats, an occasional kepi here and there. Like this guy sitting at the front, he's kneeling away. There's a guy wearing a kepi. There's cavalry at Fairfax that got captured by the Union. And these guys, it's very interesting because a lot of them look like civilians. And they're some of them got long coats, some of them have looks like white pants. Some of them are uniform and match each other, but a lot of their uniforms are a mix of civilian. A lot of them have civilian hats, maybe civilian pants, but a military coat. Maybe the occasional guy will have a kepi, but a lot of Confederate uniforms kind of seem to have this mix of civilian and military, and that might also be because of the quartermasters getting stuff to men. It wasn't always accurate, or they were never enough. So you could always just write home, "Hey, Mom, kind of needed something. You mind sewing me a pair of pants?" And if she had the material, she would send you up a pair of pants or maybe a coat or something. So that's also the reason for the popularity of jean wool, is it was a very Southern homemade sort of thing, so they could send it out to you. I think that's just about the end of my presentation, but that's just one of the things is a lot of people will go out and buy modern hats because you can find them at a lot of modern stores, I guess, and because some settlers, not all, will sell modern hats, and so the unassuming reenactor might buy one thinking it's accurate when it's really not. So I can't recommend him enough. Dirty Billy hats, that's one of the good headwear makers of our current hobby. Another one would be Goober Grabber Headwear. That's another, he's a little newer, I think, but Damien just got a kepi made by him, which is really good. But the thing is, these guys have spent so much time researching, there's no what ifs when you get a hat from them. It's no, oh, well, it has some categories that resemble hats from the time, but not all. These will always fit the bill no matter what. Like I said before, you could get a modern hat, but maybe it's nice and soft, like one of the ones you could see before, and you could crush it up or whatever, but it wouldn't have the right shape or be the right material. It might have something in it that's not exactly accurate for the time. So there's all these, in reenacting, we kind of learn, there can be little nitpicks and stuff when you get a uniform, but usually if you just kind of do I hope with this little presentation that I was able to show some things, some qualities you should look for in a hat to make sure, hey, it kind of fits the bill of what they would have had at the time and what they would have been making, would have been putting out.